Welcome everyone, my name is Kathleen Weiss and I am the User Experience Specialist at CCS. Today I am presenting on remote user testing with the library catalog. My role at CCS was changed with the onset of COVID-19 when our organization needed to quickly pivot our user testing from in-person to remote. I'd also like to note that any resources referred to throughout this presentation will be linked beneath this video. At the end of this presentation, you will be able to define user experience, define usability, name 4 user experience research methods, determine which research methods are appropriate for your research question, and access documentation and free tools to facilitate your own user testing. Before we dive in, let me tell you a little bit about CCS. Our consortium, Cooperative Computer Services, is comprised of 28 suburban libraries northwest of Chicago. We have 9 full-time employees that includes a dedicated user experience specialist. That's me. We also have a cross-departmental user experience advisory group that reviews user experience recommendations before implementation. Let's jump right in. In this presentation, when I talk about user experience, I am referring to our patrons' experience and ease of use when interacting with PowerPack and Polaris tools. So what does this user experience have to do with usability? First, let's talk a little bit about what utility and usability mean. When we talk about utility, we are concerned with whether a product has the features you need. The work associated with utility is typically done when you go through the process of selecting an ILS. You ensure it has a list of features your patrons will need. Usability comes in when your users or patrons begin to actually use those features. Usability is concerned with how easy and pleasant those features are to use. For a product like your library catalog to be useful, it needs to combine utility and usability. We provide the best user experience by ensuring our tools are useful. Take this ketchup as an example. The ketchup bottle is a lot like our catalog in that it's a container. Our container holds bibliographic records, while this container holds ketchup. While both ketchup bottles are utility, their purpose is to hold ketchup, their levels of usability are quite different. The narrow glass ketchup bottle works, but the overall experience is very unpleasant, resulting in ketchup everywhere. The plastic squeezable bottle delivers the same utility, but with a pleasant experience. Therefore, it's the more useful container. We only know this by examining its usability. As you explore your patrons' user experience with your products, you'll find that changes to the user interface can make a huge impact in the overall usability of a product, whether it's a ketchup bottle or your library catalog. You're likely thinking, thank you for the lesson on ketchup bottle design, but how do I make sure my library catalog provides the features patrons want and is easy and pleasant to use? As much as we would all like to think we know our users inside and out, we don't. The only way we can understand and learn about how our users behave is through observation and testing. That's where user testing comes in. When you conduct user testing, a lot of data is generated. You review this data to gather insights, which can then be synthesized and used to make recommendations. At CCS, we have a user experience recommendation process that illustrates how data becomes a recommendation to improve user experience. We collect feedback from staff and patrons using our staff groups, user testing, and help desk tickets. This feedback is tagged as UX and reviewed monthly. Topics are flagged for user testing. From there, I write and conduct a test plan that outlines the study goals, research methods, and how the user testing will be conducted. Data from the user testing is analyzed and recommendations are made. Stakeholders made up of staff groups and our governing board are consulted as needed. Recommendations are implemented if no more user testing is necessary. Let me walk you through a brief case study to demonstrate how our user experience recommendation process plays out. In October 2019, the Indian Trails Library joined our consortium and brought fresh eyes to our catalog. They noted that the PowerPack search tips could stand to be altered and asked whether these might be edited. I tagged this as a UX concern. The existing search tips were not hyperlinked and steeped in library jargon. A month later, we were conducting usability testing for PowerPack. We noted that our patrons were attempting to use search tips, but they weren't actionable given no hyperlink, and the language was confusing for many. After hearing this feedback again and again from patrons and from a new staff member, we did some research on how to improve the search tips. The resulting recommendation required that we replace the existing search tips. We used language patrons would understand and added hyperlinks for each tip such that the tip was activated when clicked. Now that you've got a taste for how user experience recommendations are made at CCS, let's move on to research methods. I will discuss 4 research methods, considerations for their use, give a real-world example of how CCS used the method, and point to free online tools you can use for each method. If you only choose one method to try out, I recommend remote usability testing. With this method, you'll use video conferencing software where users are given tasks to complete and told to think out loud. A facilitator reads tasks and assists the user as needed, while a note-taker records user observations that impede usability. A debriefing session allows the note-taker and observer to record multiple instances of usability problems. Each session, including the debriefing, lasts about 1 hour per user. Post-testing recommendations are made to address the most pressing usability problems. In this example, you can see a staff member moderating the usability test by reading out the tasks. A participant completes the tasks using the Think Out Loud protocol, and the note-taker records the commentary. Here's an example note-taker rubric. Here we've included each task, what PowerPack components were used by the participant, whether the user was successful in completing the task, the path taken, and an area for notes. A rubric is not always necessary, but it gave our note-takers some guidance in what to watch out for. Another reason we love usability testing is that you only need to test with 5 users to uncover 80% of your usability issues. You can test with more users if you like, but you'll likely hear a lot of the same information. Usability tools I'd recommend using include Zoom or another video conferencing software. I'd absolutely recommend you read Rocket Surgery Made Easy. It's a short book about usability testing containing everything you could ever need to know about getting started. The author's website contains all of the documentation you will need for successful usability testing. Our second method is A/B testing. A/B testing compares usage of 2 alternate designs. A/B testing can only be used for projects that have one clear, all-important goal. The goal must be measurable by computer by counting simple user actions such as click-through rate. You'll want to keep extraneous factors to a minimum. In plain language, that means do not test one design during the library's busiest weekend and another during a holiday weekend. External factors matter, and you can skew your results. We used A/B testing to test an alternative design of the Find It button. In usability testing, we found fewer patrons than we would like were using the Find It button. We redesigned the Find It button, referred to as Design B, to include a color, larger text, and no graphic, and wanted to see how it would affect patrons' usage of the button. The Fremont Library offered to test the alternative Find It button for a week. We installed a behavior analytics software called Hotjar that allowed us to not include patron search terms and isolate the analytics to users outside the library, so we didn't pick up staff searches that would skew results. The design that drove the greatest click-through rate would be determined as the best choice. Hotjar created a heat map and spreadsheet that allowed us to do a side-by-side comparison of usage for Design A and Design B. We were able to determine Design A had a click-through or conversion rate just over 6%, while Design B had a click-through rate of just above 7%. The usage increase was not statistically significant enough for us to consider changing the design, but we did learn that a simple design change would not increase patron usage of the Find It button. If you are considering running an A/B test, the best tool is Hotjar. It's free for up to 3 web pages. Bitly or Google Analytics is helpful if your A/B test is isolated to testing whether or not a link is clicked. There are so many Find It buttons in the PowerPack, neither of those tools presented an easy solution for us. But it would work for a button or component that only appears in a single place. As mentioned earlier, A/B testing is meant to measure one goal at a time. I recommend you watch the short Nielsen-Norman video on A/B Testing 101. Our next test method is the card sort. Card sorts are used to help design or evaluate the information architecture of a website. As an example, you might use a card sort to figure out how to arrange your website or catalog's menus. Cards represent common tasks and information sought on your website. Participants are given the cards to organize into categories. Participants can name the categories, this is known as an open sort, or use predetermined categories, this is known as a closed sort. At CCS, we used a card sort to evaluate the organization of our websites. Both sites are structured with the information based on how we view the content, not necessarily how our members view the content. Two distinct websites serve different purposes, but would need to be combined in a future iteration of our website. Our study goals were to understand users' preferred structure and determine how to accommodate differences. We also hoped we could determine how to combine our learning portal and CCS website menus. Most importantly, we wanted to develop ideas for how to configure the information architecture in our website redesign. We opted to use a tool called Optimal Workshop that lets users organize the cards or tasks into groups of their own making. Here you'll see a quick example of what that card sort looks like using the Optimal Workshop program. In the end, Optimal Sort creates a dendrogram, which is just a fancy way to say a visual presentation of content grouped by your participants. The key is that when 60% or more of your participants agree on a grouping, you've got a winner. You should consider grouping that content in a similar fashion on your website. Here's our sample dendrogram. Everything to the left of the dotted line labeled 60% would be a candidate for grouping together. Groups are colored so you can see that participants grouped things like procedures and documentation together in blue. The groups were taken from the dendrogram and pulled together in a table representing what a combined menu for both of our websites may look like. If you decide to perform your own card sort, there are many products available. I like Optimal Sort for a number of reasons. You can run as many card sorts as you like. The site is free for studies with less than 10 users. You should note though, card sorts should involve 20 users at a minimum, so you'll need to run multiple card sorts and compare the results. Optimal Sort also offers a free webinar and will answer any questions you have about their product. I found these webinars to be invaluable resources as I got comfortable with their product. The last method we'll take a look at are analytics. Analytics are used to measure usage and evaluate web traffic. Analytics can be useful for determining if links and catalog components are used. They're also useful for determining if placement of a catalog component ought to change. With the arrival of COVID, many of our libraries wanted to make e-cards available to their patrons quickly. This meant quickly turning on online registration for 10 of our member libraries. Patrons simply click a link above the login screen and are able to apply for an online card. One of our member libraries, Evanston, shares borders with Chicago in a suburb called Skokie. These users were applying for Evanston cards to gain access to the ebooks and other great content offered with an e-card. We tried dissuading users from applying if not an Evanston resident, but it became clear this would not work, given the number of applications we received from both Chicago and Skokie. Understandably, people were in a time of crisis and wanted online cards. They just didn't know that their home libraries offered the same e-card service provided at Evanston. We opted to include links to the Skokie e-card and Chicago e-card online applications, but didn't have a way to measure whether or not this was an effective way to move e-card applicants to the right place. That's where Bitly came in. We replaced the links in the web part with Bitly links. This allowed us to measure how many users were moving away from our e-card application page and to their home library's e-card application page. Since April, we've successfully redirected 299 patrons. This doesn't mean that 299 users got where they needed to be, but it likely represents non-residents whose applications did not require staff time to review and process. If you opt to measure usage using an analytics software, I like Bitly. It's really simple, and the dashboard helps keep everything organized. As you've seen, there are a lot of user experience research methods to choose from. Usability testing is a great place to start because it's not too difficult, is low cost, and relies on qualitative data, so you won't need to crunch any numbers. You only need to pay close attention to what your users say and note multiple instances of pain points in your catalog. Here are some tips to help you get started. Consider subscribing to the paid version of Zoom. The free version only allows for a 45-minute session. You don't want to have to rush through a usability session, or worse, you don't want to make your participant feel rushed and miss out on valuable feedback. Be sure there is a reliable internet connection for everyone participating. It's also highly recommended that the moderator should use a microphone or headset for the best quality audio. I'd highly recommend you schedule a dry run with a colleague. You don't want to find out that during testing a link doesn't work or task instructions are unclear. If you can find a friend or family member to be a part of your dry run, that's even better because they're not familiar with library tools and will give you a more realistic idea of what to expect during your first usability test. Shout out to my husband for helping me out with this every single time. I recommend you schedule a bonus participant. Remember how I said you only need to test with 5 participants? That's totally true, but something will happen where someone doesn't show up or technology fails you. Scheduling 1 or more bonus participants prevents this from ruining all of your hard work. Take the time to orient your participant. Your participant may have never used Zoom before, so it's your job to get them comfortable with the technology. Encourage your participant to test the chat functionality so you can easily send your tasks along for them to read later on. I'd encourage you to prepare a few small talk topics to discuss before testing begins so your participant is comfortable talking to you through a microphone. Also make sure that your participant is comfortable sharing their screen. Make sure you stick to the script. In the resources below this video, you'll find a script in the download links. Use it. Emphasize that you are testing the catalog or website, not the participant. Make sure you let them know that you value their feedback. Emphasize that the user can make no mistakes. You'll also want to explain that while you can answer questions, you may not be able to answer everything, as you want to see how the participant does when no one is around to offer help. Make sure to note that you'd like the participant to think out loud as they move through each task. When you're ready to read a question, send it through the chat, confirming that the participant can see the question. Then, read the question out loud. This way, the participant has an opportunity to see the question as well as hear you read it. When finished, be sure you answer any questions your participant may have. You'll want to give your note taker and any observers plenty of time to ask follow-up questions in the chat. If you can swing it, offer a token of appreciation to your users. This could be a $10 gift card to a local business, a t-shirt, keychain, or something else. This person has given you their time and energy, so it's important to say thank you. You should definitely send a thank you note in email or letter form within 24 hours of test completion. So you finished your testing, now what? In our next slide, I'll discuss how to debrief following a usability test. Debriefing is an opportunity for you, your observer, and note taker to talk about what you just saw. You'll want to start a new Zoom call with your observer and note taker to debrief on the session. Walk through your rubric, if you used one, to discuss the path users took, choices made, and whether the user was successful completing each task. As you work with additional users, you'll note many of the same things are difficult for multiple users. Be sure to note these types of things. Place all feedback into a debriefing document. Lastly, you want to place all of your debriefing data into one summary document. Summarize your findings into a single document. You'll want to take about 2 hours to review your summary and debriefing documents as needed and draft what changes and recommendations you might make to the catalog or website. Don't overthink the usability report. It's okay to simply state your notes and resulting recommendations. As you create more usability reports, you'll become more detailed. There are many usability reports you can check out below this video as examples. I like to rate my recommendations in 3 different ways: require, suggest, and explore. Require means that all CCS libraries ought to implement a recommendation. These are typically the most important recommendations that have a big impact on usability. Suggest indicates a recommendation as a best practice. Beginning a recommendation with explore indicates that a recommendation will require additional research and development and possibly more user testing in order to be implemented. As you get ready to implement all of the recommendations, it's important to note that it's unlikely you'll be able to implement every recommendation given software and development constraints as well as staff time. You want to focus your efforts and attention on the recommendations that create the highest impact for the most users. You now know a lot more about user experience and usability, various research methods, and when certain research methods are appropriate for your research question. Remember, you can access the documentation and free tools I've discussed here below this video. Happy user testing and good luck!